What's up? I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast,
where we interview successful businessmen and women to let you in on why success doesn't have a single formula to follow.
We also have a little bourbon tasting along the way, because why not?
Why not?
So guys, please enjoy this episode and let us know your thoughts at Bourbon and Business Podcast on Instagram.
Coming to you from the Bourbon and Business Studio here in the Capitol Club in downtown Jackson, Mississippi. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Dakota.
And this is the Bourbon and Business Podcast. How you doing this morning, Dakota?
Fantastic, Tyler.
I'm doing fantastic myself. Thanks for asking.
I didn't ask.
Well, you want to tell our listeners a little bit about the Capitol Club?
Yeah, today we're in the Capitol Club, the premier event space in downtown Jackson. We are on their 20th floor, the rooftop bar here, which is awesome. We've got this sweet picture of Jackson in the background here. That is the Capitol Club with the big cross on it in the background. So they got daily lunches here. They've got event spaces. They've got parking. They've got it all.
Yep. If you're not a member, you need to go join today. And then you want to introduce our guests to us.
That's absolutely. Today we have special guest John Davidson, founder and CEO of DLC. John, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Ever since I found out about the podcast and I watched a couple episodes, I said, I need to get on here myself. I'm going to talk to these gentlemen. And, this kind of sounds, I was talking to my friends. I was like, man, the Bourbon and Business this might as well be the John Davidson podcast. This is right up my alley. So I've really enjoyed your guys' content. I think the theme of the podcast is really fun and really cool. And I really appreciate you guys having me today.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming on. And what are we sipping on this morning?
Today we're sipping on the Whistler, Beekeeper's Select Irish Honey. It's Irish whiskey and honey liqueur.
I'll tell you
combined
what,
together.
It makes you want to whistle when you take a sip of it. It's named.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's
a
just
few
good.
Extra sips, you forget how to whistle is what I understand. Yeah.
But this is really good. So I don't typically like blended whiskeys, but I guess because maybe it's the honey.
Yeah.
You're not picking up a weird taste.
It's Irish honey.
But man, for a blended whiskey, I'm about to go way outside the box on this and give it an 8.8.
Wow.
I think it's got a little burn to it. I think, what did you say the proof was?
66.
So it's very low proof. If you're not into drinking whiskey,
This
and
is
you
a
want to
great
start,
intro.
you should probably start with something like this.
If you're familiar with Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey,
Mhm.
this is like a lighter Jack Daniel's, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's better than Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey.
Interesting.
Tennessee Honey, you get a little bit of that honey flavor, that little sweet. This is like heavy on the sweet because it's a honey liqueur, not just honey, I think.
Yeah. So very good. So if you're looking for a bottle, check out Cheers Vineyard in Gluckstadt, Mississippi. That's where we got this one, and they give us a lot of our bottles for the podcast.
They do.
Well, John, we appreciate you coming on this morning. We like to always start this, just kind of give our listeners your background, where you're from, and then how you got to the point of founding your company.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a windy, long road. I'll give you the short version, but I grew up in a small town in the Central Valley of California. This is not near the beach. This is not near anywhere you are going on vacation. This is where all the fruit in the world is grown. So I now live just outside of Dallas, Texas, and people say, why would you ever leave California? And I'm like, guys, what you're picturing in your mind was not my view outside the window. But it was, looking back, it was a great place to grow up, and it was a great place for skateboarding. So the first steps in my career were actually as a sponsored skateboarder at age 14.
Nice.
And I gathered a number of sponsors throughout high school, and I had an opportunity to drop out of community college and buy a one-way ticket to Orlando, Florida to meet or to live with the owners of the skateboard company I was with. And that just became, I think the stat was, I lived in the same house until I was 20. Didn't move one time.
Wow.
And then over the next handful of years, I moved 9 times in 7 years, 5 times cross country, including a 6-month-long skateboarding tour with no pauses. I just sold everything I had. I jumped on a plane to then jump on a bus. And originally they said, you're going to be on tour for 2 months. My first day there, they said, John, we got more funding, we got more dates. You're on tour for 6 months now. I said, perfect. My calendar is clear. I have no plans other than this. And then I ended up breaking my ankle at the end of this tour in Louisville, Kentucky, home of a lot of fantastic bourbons, coincidentally. But I moved out to Washington, D.C., and where I grew up, it's just farms. And so everybody I knew either was a farmer or a teacher or maybe worked at some factory that provided the equipment for doing so, right? And so I did not have the first thought of business in my mind. I was able to support myself with skateboarding full-time sometimes, but a lot of times I had to have a crappy job to support myself on the side as well.
Sure.
So I did telemarketing for a timeshare resort company, making 200 calls a day. And if you did a good job, you made 2 sales. Rough. I followed that up by doing cell phone sales in the Florida Mall, which is the #1 visited mall in the United States. And if you're wondering where nobody buys a cell phone, it's on vacation. And then I had a short stint before going on that tour where I was managing a couple cell phone stores in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I wanted to go on a trip to Mexico, a skateboarding trip. And they wouldn't let me go. So like any responsible young man, I said, I'm quitting to go on a skateboard trip for a week. And so when I came back, I had about a couple months before, 6 to 8 weeks before I was going on this tour. So I needed money, but I wanted to get a job where they're not investing like too much into you, because it really sucks for the company if they hire you, they train you, they invest in you, and you leave. So I was like, where do they not care if you quit? And that turned out to be Kirby Vacuums doing door-to-door Kirby vacuum sales, knocking on doors and saying, hey, can I vacuum a room in your house and try to talk you into selling or buying this $1,900 vacuum? And so all of that I mentioned preceded me breaking my ankle, coming off tour, and thinking, I don't even know what I want to do or can do.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've had crazy experience and none of it's been really enjoyable or something I saw a career path with. Well, a friend of mine said, John, you should go to a temp agency. And I said, what's a temp agency? Where I grew up, we didn't have those. Oh, temporary employment. So it's the coolest story is I go in there and I'm doing my test. They see what you can do, how fast you can type, computer stuff you're familiar with. And I was familiar with some of that stuff. Well, they said, John, we'll call you in 3 to 5 days with a job offer. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm signing my paperwork to give them the rights to my employment and such as I'm about to leave. And there was these 4 ladies in the middle of the room calling folks to offer them jobs, right? Matching experiences with needs from their clients. And I overheard this one woman, and I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but it sounded like that person did not want this job for whatever reason. So I'm literally walking out of the office, grabbing the glass door to go home, and this lady runs after me, grabs me by the shoulder and says, John, do you want a job starting tomorrow? And I was like, is this one of those paying jobs? Because that's my only qualifier at this point in my life. And she said, yes, pays. And she said, it's at a place called Beers and Cutler. In my mind, I thought, Beers and Cutler, alcohol and knives.
I'm there.
Well, it turned out it's actually a tax firm founded by Jim Beers and John Cutler. But long story short, what I found out was, what's that?
What a disappointment.
Tell me about it. Way less exciting than assumed. Well, it turned out that this is one of the top 50 best places to work in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
One of the top 25 best managed tax firms in the nation and the fastest growing independent tax firm in the United States. And I just got placed at this incredible place where the tasks of my work were not particularly enjoyable or stimulating or anything I would brag about, but the culture was incredible. And so what that taught me was it's not about what you do with the tasks so much as who you do it with.
Mm-hmm.
And so that inspired me to go back to school. I got my marketing degree. Over this, time, I gained an interest in marketing. And then I moved out to to Dallas after going to school at Sacramento State, started a design studio with a friend. Then I had an opportunity to get into actual marketing at the marketing arm in Dallas. I got my foot in the door as a producer in their content studio, producing commercials, because that was kind of my design studio experience. And then I kind of worked my way through the agency to get onto the GameStop team. So, largest video game store in the world. A lot of headlines about stock recently. They hired me on the agency team, and shortly after, they hired me on the brand side as head of GameStop partnerships. And so that title for a big company in a vibrant category was really a rocket ship for my network. And my first day, they said, John, in addition to partnerships, we want you to figure out esports. And I was like, let's do this. And so that, developing an expertise in this industry that a lot of people wanted to understand to effectively reach youth, but a lot of people did not have a good understanding, put me in a position to join a number of boards. I became the founding president of the Esports Trade Association and then the board chair for 6 years. I was able to do a TED Talk, which was a surreal experience I never would have thought. I was featured on the Barracks, the world's largest skateboarding website, to talk about how skateboarding has influenced my world. And I joined the advisory board of University of North Texas's Sports and Entertainment Management MBA program, which is one of the best in the world, where I continue to serve, and is just incredible. And then I got recruited by PRG, Production Resource Group, which is the world's largest live event production company, to lead them into esports. And we had so much momentum, and we had so many things working in our favor, and it was just like lightning in a bottle, and everything was going incredible until, I don't know if you guys heard about it, but March of 2020, something happened. And every live event in the world stopped because of COVID, and I lost this job on this insane upward trajectory, thinking I found the thing that I'm going to do the rest of my career. And so I'll wrap it up with this, is that I was stuck at home, and I'm thinking, what do I want to do? And I was, like I said, I've had some great jobs, right? But I've had a bunch of jobs that sucked too.
Yeah.
Can I find another one of these great jobs? Or we don't even know if events are coming back. What is the world going to look like? And I was working with an executive coach at the time, which, shout out to the Esports Trade Association. They set me up to work with an executive coach to become a better leader, so we would be a better led organization, which is something I'll be continually grateful for. This woman, Sharon Gill, was my coach, and I met with her one morning. She said, John, you're a brand. She said, you know how many people want to start their own personal brand, their own consulting company, and have nothing to build it on? She's like, John, you have the skateboarding, you've got the esports expertise, you've got the public speaking set, you've got like 5 things to build a business on. And I said, well, thanks, Sharon, but I'm definitely not going to do that. I never thought about owning my own business or being entrepreneurial. Well, I met with my pastor, is actually a great mentor of mine, Jason Norton. And we're sitting down on his porch. He's got this beautiful, house in the country here in Texas. And he said, John, if PRG could bring you back, when would they do it? And I said, honestly, it'd probably be about 6 months. That's a long time, right? And he said, well, John, the way I see it, it's ultimately your decision. But the hardest thing for people to decide when they're going to go from being an employee to an entrepreneur is saying no to that consistent paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, John, you may not make any money over the next 6 months, but you have a unique opportunity here to try. And that's what I did. And that was almost 5 years ago. I started Davidson Learning Company. And the mission and the vision is to provide learnings, which are insights based on experience, provide learnings to brands, agencies, and cities on how to effectively engage the esports community. And I've had the opportunity to do it for Coca-Cola, the Frisco, Texas Economic Development Corporation, Six Flags, Game Square, a number of different companies that have just been at my Mount Rushmore of brands that I've looked up to. And it's been an incredible blessing and quite a ride to date.
Super cool story.
Yeah.
So, and I really hope our listeners hear the part about, you had that 6-month opportunity there. A lot of people would have taken that and,
squandered it,
whined and been like, oh, I don't have anything to do, COVID, but actually taking something that's bad and turning it into something positive. And
Yeah.
so I really like to hear that, and I hope our listeners pick up on that.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. Well, John, tell us a little bit about your TED Talk. What did that look like? What was it on?
Yeah, so the TED Talk is about how the dangers of immediate gratification, greatly because of these immediate gratification enablers we all have in our pockets,
Mm-hmm.
and how to overcome that from the perspective of basically how focusing on a long-term goal and delaying gratification results in success. And so it was, I'd love to have people watch the TED Talk. It was a fun way to tie my experience and put it all together. But I just think that it's so important, especially for young people. We're just stuck with the immediacy of what I want to do, or I don't feel like doing something now. And I heard somebody say one time, our failure is that we let our emotions dictate what we do, when the truth of the matter is what we do actually dictates our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I heard somebody say, man, if you want to feel more loving towards someone, act more loving towards someone, and the feelings follow. If you want to feel successful, work hard and grind and go for it, and you'll see. So it's really just look at that long-term goal, put together attainable milestones, and don't live and die by today's or tomorrow's immediate gratification.
Yeah. Such wise words there.
For sure.
What would you tell our listeners that are out there? You spoke on building your personal brand. What advice would you give them, in the world that we live in? I know you have a large following on LinkedIn and some of your social media platforms. What are things they can do to get their expertise out to the public to grow that brand?
100%. I talk to a number of college students about this all the time, and I think that the most valuable platform we have at our disposal is LinkedIn. I remember when I was in college, and this is a while ago now, but I was like, man, LinkedIn is like the lame version of Facebook. And Facebook's not even cool, LinkedIn, like a bunch of boomers like trying to do their own social media platform. What's going on here? And I could not have been more wrong. It's insane that you have the ability to reach out, connect with, and follow anybody in business in any industry in the world, And so then the next question would be, okay, well, how do you create a following, or how do you create that engagement, right? What I've noticed as someone who has a little bit of a following is what I appreciate is when people interact with my content. And I notice it, right? Because when I post content, I want to get that immediate gratification, the likes, but I want the reach, right? So understanding how the algorithm works, if you comment on posts on LinkedIn, it greatly increases the reach. So I would say find tactful ways to engage with people's posts who you want to connect with. Number one, to get their attention, because there's a certain level of goodwill that I feel towards someone when they're interacting with my posts, when they're commenting in appropriate ways, because it helps my reach, right? Yeah. Now, the next thing you might say is like, okay, well, that's all well and good. I can follow people and I can interact with them, but how do I get and build a network for myself and a following for myself, right? It's all about consistent content that is worth posting. So what I did when I started my own brand, DLC, I also started a podcast called the DLC Drop Podcast. We did it for about 2 years, 121 weekly episodes. And it was about interviewing industry leaders, telling the stories of their career journeys and what they learned along the way. Because I've always been fascinated with successful people, and how they got there and what they learned. Well, what that did for me is it created an automatic mechanism of content that I could post 3 days of the week minimum, basically automatically. Wednesday, here's the episode. Thursday, here's one of the insights in a cut down 1 minute or less clip. Friday, same thing. And then if I want to post more insights or something kind of funny, or I love tying skateboarding to business principles and stuff like that. Well, I can do that. Well, the thing I learned about content that is so important, especially if you're posting a lot, the best content is not about you. And so, like, people are like, there's John again. Yeah, he worked at GameStop and he's a skateboarder and he's speaking on a stage again. It's like, yeah, we get it, John. Quit talking about yourself. But the thing I loved about the podcast, and you don't have to just do a podcast to do this, but I had an opportunity to give someone a platform and promote them and tell people how awesome they were and share insights that people could learn from that was not about me. And so that creates goodwill with the guest. It also, creates some kind of a culture of humility around like I'm here, my hat says learn. My company is Davidson Learning Company. I have a slogan, never not learning. Like, I'm all about learning and sharing and teaching, and I think there are no wasted opportunities in life if you learn from them. And so, and then the last thing I would say is, okay, if I don't have a podcast, how can I, because sometimes you do want to post about yourself, right? I'm speaking at this thing. I got a new job. I accomplished this thing. Whatever. Well, you can still put it with an others first type tone, right? So if I'm speaking at a conference, I could say it one of two ways. I could say, man, I'm speaking at this conference. I'm so hyped to be doing the keynote, and look at me, I'm awesome and cool and blah, 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 right? Or I could say, wow, I'm so thankful to XYZ conference for hosting and be the keynote. I've been so inspired by the events that they've put on, and I'm thrilled to speak alongside these incredible speakers, tag them, give them a follow, right? So the difference of, you're saying the same thing, but in different ways, people really respond to the second one when you're promoting other people. So when you add value to other people, value comes back to you.
Yeah, and I think that, I was just about to say that you've touched on this several times throughout this episode, but, lifting others up in turn will lift you up. And I think that that's such an important thing. Even,
there's a saying about that.
What is
A
it?
rising tide lifts all boats.
Oh, there you go. So, but, I think it's so important in business or whatever you're doing in life that, if it's about you, more than likely it's going to fail. But if it's about others and how you can help others, then that's where you can find success. And I think, whatever you're doing, make sure your principle and goal is not a selfish goal. Yes, everybody wants to be successful, and that's not a bad thing in itself, but it can't just be about you. So, very wise
100% agree.
I wanted to be a major league gamer back in the day.
How's that going?
I did not do it. My parents told me that was not a career. And then 3 years later, there were kids winning millions of dollars for playing Halo. And I just feel like I missed my calling, truly. But that's okay, because we're doing a podcast now. And we're trying to do exactly what you were talking about there, John. So
That's right.
I'll consent. It was okay. But tell us a little bit about your big challenges and opportunities facing esports right now, and what we can look forward to. Because obviously GameStop is kind of like a meme stock now, but obviously the gaming world is just growing in popularity. And there's it all started with, it didn't start this way, but I feel like Halo, Call of Duty, those were the things that got young kids really involved in gaming. And then there's also Madden and FIFA, and there's this whole other world, right? And so now the games are getting more and more intricate, more and more evolved, more and more the controls are super complicated. I looked at something the other day, I was like, there's no way I'd be able to play this game because it's so complicated. So what does it look like in the future?
Yeah, so from a business standpoint, the biggest challenge with the esports industry currently is consistent revenue for groups that are not the publisher of the game. So specifically, the teams are quite challenged from a profitability standpoint currently. I think long term that's going to look a little different, and I can explain why. The other great and unique challenge that esports experiences is that with video games, there's a company that owns the IP, the intellectual property of the game.
Right.
And so with you guys, if we wanted to start any sports league, like a football league or whatever, we could, right? We could have all the same rules as the NFL. We could have the same scoring, the same size field, the same ball. We couldn't call it the National Football League, right? But we could call it the Bourbon and Business Football League or whatever, right?
That's great, actually. Like, we could
Let's do it.
we could do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Let's talk after this. So, but if we wanted to do that with Call of Duty or League of Legends or Valorant or Counter-Strike, we could not. Why? Because nobody owns the IP of a traditional sports game. But in video games, they do. And so there are great restrictions around these games, and some publishers are a little more generous in how they let folks use the game. It's very common that publishers let youth play their games for free and compete, but if a brand wants to do anything that's going to make money or charge a ticket or something, it's very restricted. So it makes it really challenging. What I expect is in the coming years, I think there's going to be a publisher that's going to open up their IP and have a longer term focus to understand if I just have a bigger player base and if I have more brands able to fund and produce these tournaments, you're probably going to need some guidelines in there, of course. But I think the publisher that opens up the IP for the game is going to become the esports title that everybody gravitates to and plays. Now, you also need to have a great game that continually, engages the community, and there's a lot of nuance there, so I don't want to appear oversimplified. But I think someone like a Rocket League, which is cars playing soccer, which is easy to watch if you've never seen it. It's a lot of fun to play and easy to get into, but there's an incredible high skill ceiling where the pros are really pros and what they can do is special and unique, and it's exciting to watch both online and in person. The other thing is the revenue structure in esports. So in traditional sports, the number one source of revenue are media dollars, right? So we hear every once in a while, oh, the NBA just did a new TV deal and it's 10 years and it's billions of dollars, right? And
Right.
it's rev shared between the teams, right? Because the teams are owners of the league that they play in. And then there's kind of the cherry on top with sponsorship, with food and beverage sales, merchandise sales, ticket sales with games, right? That's traditional sports. In esports, by far the number one revenue driver is sponsorship, and media rights are way behind. Now, the reason why that's the case is not just because we're a bunch of stupid gamers and don't know what we're doing in business. That's not the case at all. It's just that we're further down the line with streaming traditional sports. Because traditional sports is still on programmatic television, right?
Right.
Except for last year in the NFL where I didn't know how to find one football game on which streaming platform. I was like, do I have to subscribe to all of them?
Yeah.
I cannot afford football season this year. Like, what is going on? But, I was at a meeting with UNT and Jerry Jones Jr. was speaking to the group. And one of the college students had a great question for him. They said, Mr. Jones Jr., you're so successful in all these ways. You have all these businesses. You have the most valuable sports franchise in the world. What keeps you up at night? And he said, we just did a media deal for the NFL. He said, what keeps me up at night is the next media deal, because that is going to be all streaming. And so I think that's something that'll be figured out. And people who are listening to this might say, well, John, profitability is a problem. IP is a problem. Like, why should I even get into this space or be bullish on it at all? And the answer is this. The number one question in business is, do you have a consumer for your product or service, right? Are there people using what you're selling? Are they interested in what you're doing? If there is one thing true in esports and gaming, is that the players continue to grow globally year after year after year, and there's no slowing down. So gaming and esports is absolutely the future of entertainment. And what I do is I help brands, agencies, and cities understand how to put their arms around this and their unique path in this space. And so while there are some current and immediate challenges, the future looks bright.
Yeah. And, you touched on a good point there about it being the future. I was having a conversation with my nephew a couple of weeks ago, and he's probably 7, 8 years old. And we're talking, and I was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, you want to be a professional baseball player? He said, no, I want to be a gamer. And it kind of struck me then. I was like, when we were kids, everybody, hey, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to be a actor or whatever. But kids today, that's what they strive for. They want to be a gamer. So it is the future. It is coming. And I think that those that take advantage of it will be the ones that are successful.
Well, I think Twitch and YouTube have given a proof of concept that it works, that kids and adults want to watch people playing video games. Fortnite was huge on Twitch with Ninja, the guy who originally like came out, and he was, had like hundreds of millions or billions of views on YouTube and Twitch, and was making tons of money off of it too. So like I fully believe I'm just thinking like a TV show, about gaming or something, or an actual esports channel, on a TV subscription model on YouTube TV would make a killing in ad revenue. I think it would have to.
Well, what's a really great opportunity for brands is that you do get a lot of views, because it is a global, billions of people playing games. Now that is you got to filter that through which game, because different people play different types of games. There's different areas of the world where one game is more popular than the other, etc. But the level of engagement when you approach this group, what everybody's confused about, and this is what really helped me going from skateboarding to esports. When I got into esports at GameStop, what I found out is everyone was confused how to effectively engage gamers, because gamers are uniquely skeptical about brands coming into their space as sponsors. And you think about traditional sports, we see All-State hands in the college, catching the field goals, and we see State Farm on the side of the NBA goal post, and the basket and things, and we don't think twice about it, right? We're like, oh, cool, that Caitlin Clark commercial is really funny, Jake from State Farm, we got no problem with it. Well, gamers are like, what are you doing in my space, and what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Well, what enabled me just to really inherently understand this group of people is that there's one group that's more skeptical of brands than gamers. It's skateboarders. We don't want anyone in our space. But the difference between skaters and gamers is the desire to be accepted by the mainstream. So skateboarding is counterculture. We don't want anything to do with anybody. We're out here in these streets. We're jumping down handrails. We're breaking the law. We don't need the X Games or the Olympics or your brand that's not owned and run by skateboarders in our space. That's our attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gamers, if done correctly, accept and embrace brands who enhance their experiences. Every time I talk to a brand when I'm consulting them, I say, guys, if the experiences of the community are not better by the result of your brand being embraced or being involved, you don't have the right strategy. So let's figure out how you can organically integrate into this space, and what can you do to make it better for gamers. And when you do that, the level of engagement and loyalty and passion for a brand just skyrockets. And so there's great opportunity, but you have to do it the right way. And I know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, makes sense. Well, we appreciate you coming on today. We like to always take this time of the podcast, just tell our listeners how they can connect with you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me. Instagram is @DLCDrop. If you want to hear any of the past podcast episodes, the DLC Drop podcast, there's some incredible industry leaders on there who shared great knowledge. And if you just type in John Davidson Esports or DLC on LinkedIn, I pop up, look like this, and anybody can feel free to shoot me a note. I love engaging with folks and helping when I can.
Great. Sweet. And Dakota, what were your thoughts on the whiskey?
The Whistler Beekeeper Select Irish Honey 66 proof, you gave it an 8.8. I thought it was really, really sweet. Too sweet for me, though. It was delicious. It's a great intro into whiskeys if you're looking for something that's going to be like delicious. You don't have to mix it with your drink or anything. You just pour this over ice or leave it in the freezer, honestly, and it'd be fantastic as like a little dessert drink. But I'm only at an 8.3 because I wanted a little bit more whiskey flavor to it.
Let me ask you guys a question real quick. I know we're close to the end of the time here, but I want to get your reaction to my 10 as 10. So my favorite bourbon would be Basil Hayden.
Okay.
How are you boys ranking that?
Which one?
I go with just not the, I just go with the basic one, not the toast.
Yeah.
Well, I got a friend who that's their favorite, but mine just that basic Basil Hayden is my jam.
So we've had one Basil Hayden on here, I think, so far. And in my opinion, Basil Hayden it's like LeBron James. You either love it or you're just not a fan. For me, I just wasn't a fan.
Interesting.
But I know other people who are just like, that's my go-to number one drink on, every time anybody has a birthday, a wedding, any kind of present, they're gifting Basil Hayden. It is a cool bottle. It looks good on a shelf. So, there is that attribute to it. But for me, it just didn't have quite the flavor that I like. But, I mean, that's completely personal.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, just being completely honest, I don't remember trying it. I do know what the bottle looks like.
That's a sign of a good bourbon. Must have been your birthday.
Yeah, I do. I do know the bottle looks nice. But yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head taste of it. So, but we appreciate you coming on. For the Whistler, we're going to give it an 8.5.
Yep.
So if you're the Whistler out there, give us a sponsorship. We like your bourbon. And to all our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. Follow us on social media and rate us on however you stream this podcast. And we will see you next week.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
If you have any feedback or would like to be featured, reach out to us at bourbonandbusinesspodcast@gmail.com.
Or find us on Instagram at Bourbon and Business Podcast.
Thanks again for listening.
Follow us for more content and info on the next episode.